Let's do it. Hello and welcome. We're here for another episode of the Rise and Pod with Adrian Conway. Guys, today I am joined by guests. Believe it or not, yes, I do have guests. And Matt, you are the very first guest on Rise and Pod with Adrian Conway. So welcome, my friend.
Thank you. Wait, first guest ever.
First guest ever. So I've been riding solo, man, for about 100 and probably by the time this airs, 30 some odd episodes.
Really?
So people tune in and they listen to me, give them the daily charge from 4 to 7 minutes. And today we're diving in deep with you, Mr. Matt O'Keefe, the representer. I don't even know what you can technically categorize yourself, man. Are you an agent?
Yeah, it's probably what I identify most with, but I obviously have a lot going on, but that's who I am and how I got where I am and what I identify most with for sure. So agent to a lot of really good people.
Yeah. And to be honest, guys, if you don't know, to catch you up, and we'll get into some more details, but Matt represents the most successful athletes in the functional fitness sport, and he's expanded his role much broader outside of that. Is you're officially the operating president for Live Loud?
Loud and Live Sports.
And Live. I apologize. Yeah. So
no worries.
That is something that we'll dive into, because you're a man of many talents, and clearly your journey has kind of ebbed and flowed throughout the fitness space. But first, I want to share a memory of mine with you. It was the first time that we ever met, and I as I recall, if it is accurate, it was at Wadapalooza. This is for me personally, guys. I had gone through about 3 years of CrossFit or 4 years of CrossFit. I want to say this is like circa 2014-ish. It's prior to me getting an individual spot at the CrossFit Games. So, I'm hanging with the Brew Crew. Mike Kaziu's there. He introduces us. We go out to lunch, and Matt is talking to us about the potential in this sport and what it could be and what it could mean for athletes, and if they represent themselves well, and what he had in mind. And at the time, he was speaking a foreign language to me. It resonated because I came from the football world, where I got to have an opportunity to interact with an agent and have some representation in my final year at Weber State. But man, you were such a pioneer at the time. So 2014, I hear about all these things, and to fast forward to now to see all the things that you've done has been tremendously amazing. So I want to start even before that, though. So that's kind of our origin story. Matt,
that's a great story, by the way, and thank you for bringing me back, because it's funny what I do now, and I was such a fan of that event, and we'll talk more about it later, but it was because of that. I got to that was the event every year. I got to do that, speak to good people like you, and I probably did sound a little crazy then, but I believed it in my heart that it would look what it looks like now, and that it has still so much to go. So. But yeah, that was a great Whole Foods outside on that table eating lunch.
That's it. That was it. I don't even know what I was eating, but it was something delicious from Whole Foods in between an event or something. I think it was myself, Brennan Fjord, and Jacob Hutton. We were throwing down. We looked like a pack of gorillas out there, on a competition floor. All of us old Division I football players.
I had a salt bike workout that year and ran up the hills. I was like, that, by the way, little known fact for your listeners, is the most successful weekend every year at any one Whole Foods ever. Like every year it breaks the record for the most sales at a Whole Foods.
That's amazing, and also not surprising if people know, guys. If you're familiar or you're not familiar, Wadapalooza is the fitness festival. It is multiple days, right there on the beach, off the water. I mean, it's an amazing experience, and the CrossFit community goes in hard on that spot, on that city. So, wow! But to consider all the other events that take place throughout the year, I can't imagine. That's pretty amazing. So even as we're here, Matt, we're kind of reflecting now. I want to take a bit of a further step back. Talk to me a little bit about, because what I see you as, Matt, is very much a pioneer, a trendsetter, and I've used those words prior to this. Were you always this way? Were you raised as a bit of an outlier, or a leader always in your life?
Wow, thank you. Yeah, that's a good question. I feel like, yeah, when I played sports, I always tried to lead through my work example, in spirit, and I was fortunate enough to be talented and got to play athletics at a high level, but I also worked harder than anyone else. And we in team, I love team sports. I know you're a team sports guy. I mean, I lived for it, and I felt like, yeah, that was my, God-given talent, was to lead by example, inspire. And I was always on cool, successful teams in high school and college. And yeah, I mean, and that comes, I mean, honestly, I watched my dad do it his whole life, in business, because it was what I was most exposed to. I worked with him after school, but I looked up to my dad. He was a coach in high school baseball, then ran his own business, and he had a knack for inspiring and rallying people, and it was something I was interested in. And I'm like, I'm telling you, it's really interesting. I'm such an individual representative, because I would tell you I'm probably the biggest team sports person in history. Like, there's nothing like being in a locker room, on a field, like fourth quarter, dying and finding the little extra, because you look to your left and your right, and that's all that matters. I get chills thinking about it. It's like, it was easy for me because I think I was just so passionate about people around me and those teams and the institutions I was playing for, which is, I think, why I've had success with what I do now, because it transfers really well. Like, I don't work a day. I just love the people I work with so much that I work my ass off every day for them.
I love that, and I think that resonates strongly with exactly where you're at right now. Even though you mentioned you might represent individuals, and you might even do a lot of work sometimes clearly by yourself. That everybody has that, but what you've been able to form around you, this team of athletes, individuals, the team that you work with. I mean, to have any role like president at any organization, you're going to have to interact well, follow well, lead well, and serve well, more importantly. So I think that definitely suits your role right now where you're at. I know, and I'd love to know more about this, but you were an insurance agent prior to starting Redline, is that right?
Yeah, a little bit before that too. And by the way, to note, I'm part of a major team now. Like, and what, hey, Matt and I and Sammy and Shane and Tia were a team this year, last year, 2 years in a row. Like, Matt and I are a team. Those are his words, right? It's funny. It's like, you always sit in these seats in the support roles, and I'm very precise on not taking credit, because it's not me. But those that I work with are team people. They always use the words we. It's so fun. But my team at Loud and Live, like, I have the best team in the world. Like, and Wadapalooza is 1,000 volunteers. So I guess I'm like still in the game, try rallying 1,000 people that work 18 hours a day and don't drink water and sit in the sun in Miami for 4 days. But yeah, I mean, to go back to my career, I was in my family business. My family owned a car dealership,
Okay.
and I got the best opportunity. It was, go to graduate school or go work for dad. And I went with dad. And it's funny, looking back at the time, I became like a master of nothing, but I got to do everything. And now today I get to derive a ton of value from my experience right out of college, being able to, I was like managing people before I deserved to. I made all the mistakes you could imagine, owner's kid, got opportunity, didn't deserve, screwed it up 6 times, different ways. And, didn't love that business, but, had fun with it and got better at it and learned and grew. And then, my father was, and I didn't go separate ways in terms of not being able to get along, but like, I didn't like the business. GM was going through a bunch of craziness. My father went and wanted to work for a bigger dealer group. So he went, I exited the business, and I got an insurance, and man, I was like dying a slow death. So, and by the way, when you look back, it's because insurance is like the most individualized sport in the world. It's like you're just, out writing policies with people on your own. You make, and I don't mind that. Like, I'm confident and did well with it. I just didn't like it. And the reason now I look back, I didn't like it is it was a people business, but it was always a opposition exchange. It was not necessarily, always collaborative. So I sought out, a sort of reset. And I found it in a CrossFit gym. That's really kind of it. I walked in a CrossFit gym, and as so many of us got inspired by the community and what the vibe, and it was so new at the time. It was like 2012. I'm like, you know what? Just like start something that I'm passionate about, in this space, and just, to have fun with. And it grew. And that was Redline Gear, the clothing company I started.
I love it. So you mentioned a couple things that right there that stood out to me is that, you felt like you basically received a role that you didn't deserve at that car dealership. And this is a lot of people, right? So sometimes we fall into opportunity, and sometimes I guess it presents itself to us in a variety of ways. But what I want to ask about that is, how did you feel like you dealt with some of those pressures from like the people that were beneath you or your coworkers that perceived you this way? How did you felt like you dealt with that?
Yeah, it was an interesting seat to be in, because I felt like I had always earned. I mean, I felt, maybe you played, high level college football. It's like, I guess when you get, to greater levels in sport, you always feel like you've like overly earned it, right? There's that, yeah, maybe there's some guys in the D1 football game that were just the cock of the walk out of high school and started as a freshman, but like, you ground to get it, and in sports, for me, that was it. It was like, played baseball in college, and like, I felt like I was getting cut every game, never mind playing, and maybe that was a good, looking back now, I love that mentality, right? But at the time, it was gut wrenching, and then I was like, in business, all of a sudden, it was like, I just was given the big role, and I gravitated towards work, in team, and like being a part of the team, to a detriment. It's funny. This was like my dad's biggest critique of me. My knee jerk was to like, friend, employees, hang out with them, try to gain trust that way. The only way I knew how, build relationships. And it's a hard way sometimes, especially in a car dealership environment, to manage. And I mean, I learned some hard lessons, that were recoverable, but I made, and I say like I made all the mistakes. It's just, tried to manage with aggression, with love, but it, everything always pointed back, eventually to like, there's only one way to go about it. It's roll your sleeves up, work, show them you can work, do all the jobs. I changed oil. I balanced tires. I swept the floors, even after doing jobs with a suit and tie, because it was time, to say, all right, I can get dirty with you. Like, I'm not the pretty boy that from school, college. And that ended up being the route that got me where I needed and wanted to be, which was just the only thing I really know, which is to do work.
I love it, man. And I think I mean, it's a perfect perspective, right? To give the listeners, because, again, our community is one that people are trying to gain more, seek new levels of their life. And it doesn't matter if they're in a position that they like, or that they've been handed, or if they're in a position where they're fighting for more success or more influence or whatever it is, they can follow in that example. It's just like, do the work, right? Prove your worth to others by doing the things that other people are overlooking. That's exactly what it sounds like you were doing.
You know what it is? You know what my favorite line is, and like my team will hear this and laugh, but I probably say it every meeting, is that it's actions over intentions. Like,
Let's
it's like,
go.
my dad said that to me when I was probably 22 out, and I was like, dude, shut up. Like, what are you talking? It's like one of those reactions. It's like, what do you mean? But it's so true. It's like, you can talk all you want. But it's just, it's the do. It's like how you act in all different environments, and most importantly under adversity, right? So it's like, that's it.
That's it. And that was one of my questions. Action over intention. What does that mean to you, and where to come from? You mentioned that your dad did talk about that, and I couldn't help but be captivated by it. I see it in association with your name. So how do you foster this? I mean, you're even a father now, clearly, and you work with athletes that are, man, these guys are pursuing next level human feats of fitness and everything else, right? So how do you walk this out with the team? You say you mentioned to them all the time. So how's this look for you guys?
Yeah, I mean, there's so many different layers of it, right? It's funny, like I look back to how I started with Matt, and it was like, my initial knee jerk was like, just get in the gym with them, work out. And that nearly killed me. And it was like, but truly, you know this too. And it's, who do you respect most? It doesn't matter if they're taking double your time, but if they're like dying through their last reps, it's like, all right, you're one of us, right? Like, it's like golfers golf and CrossFitters CrossFit together. It's kind of a weeding out process. I think that, so that's such a big part of our culture at Loud and Live Sports with the athletes. It's, um, we live it all together, that lifestyle. And, but when I look at the different layers, whether it's the team and we're building an event or we're doing work for a brand, I just love to, again, I'll probably be the answer to everything. It's just roll the sleeves up, and it's just, it's putting the hours in. And I've tried really hard the last couple of years to step back and say, like, they need me to do less. They're way smarter than me. They need now my experience, right? Because this is the new one for me, which resonates the most, is like, these guys that are around me are far more talented than I ever will be. And it's, I look at them and I'm like, wait, you just don't know what you don't know. That's what I have right now. So my job is to make sure you just gain experience. And, yeah, I mean, I have a great creative mind that can help, but it's like, just how do I keep their confidence high? Cause it's a grind, it's startup life, event business, marketing, we're a lot of 2 a.m.s in the office with the whiteboard. And so you take that to the athlete side. It's the same thing. It's like, my role there is, so many different layers for each of them. I've been most involved with Matt from start to finish. And, it might be, long talks at night, but are very similar in nature. It's like, he hasn't experienced something that maybe I have in a different medium, but it's the same, and it's, just hard, a hard life fact, or, you know, building confidence. I learned a lot from Matt too, which is amazing. That's such a beautiful relationship for me. We just, we have a lot in common, but yeah, I mean, he put a lot of trust in me, which then gave me confidence I might have lacked to then help him. There's a lot. I mean, it's real. There's a lot to unwind there, but it's, all of it is just, you know, a deep love and passion of what we do. And it allows us, really to not work a whole lot. And that's, I don't find myself at Wadapalooza in my hotel room, just getting home at 4 a.m. because we're wrapping up the night before and got to be back there at 6:30 saying, man, my life sucks. Like, I'm like, I can't get to sleep, or at the games, not being able to sleep because of the day that Matt went through, and what could I have done better to help him for 1/4% so that he might have won that workout and not finished second, which didn't happen a lot, but it's just, I mean, I guess I'm fortunate. I just really do love what I do and get to work with such extraordinary people that, it doesn't, I don't lack energy even at my age. Like, I'm 43, like, that's not old, but I feel 22. Like, I can go. I'm fresh off a red eye from Vegas. We were looking at some venues out there, and it's like, I took 12 hours of calls today and felt great. Like, I just, it doesn't, it's not work, and that's probably it. And everybody around me is like that, whether it's an athlete, somebody at Loud and Live, a volunteer, and it, you see it, you've lived it, you've benefited from it, you've been around people on teams that are like it, in business. It's such a cool crew of people.
I love it, man. And I think that's it. That's a takeaway, right? Like, do something and find something that you're passionate about. You'll naturally start to live out that action over intention mentality. I know that we kind of got off the storyline, but you stepped into a CrossFit gym, and then you had this idea. How did Redline come to birth? Because, I mean, what is it like? You just saw that people had ugly clothes at the gym. Did you see that they just needed some good looking swag to rock? Like, what was it truly that stood out to you? Like, no, I'm gonna come in right there.
It's funny. Yeah, you want to, really get your wife's attention, have a good steady job and come home from your CrossFit workout and tell her you're starting a clothing company. Yeah, it's, you know, I take it back just to, I tell this often. I've always been very entrepreneurial in spirit, but never had the stones to be entrepreneurial. And for the first time, kind of like, really, it got me back in like a college locker room or a high school locker room where it was like, every day felt like, going to practice, and there's confidence built around that. And it was like, and I was in the number 50 affiliate in the world. So they were like sort of on the forefront of CrossFit. And there was, Boston was a particularly big hub for, and still is for, a lot of businesses that have been very successful. Noble, Reebok, Whoop, Beam, like you can go down the list, like Fuel for Fire, CFNE, CompTrain, like there's a lot of, it's a big hub. And so it was inspiring. And I was like, you know what? I love this space. It's changing my life. I had been through a big life change at the time. I've told a lot of people I got sober and needed something to really like focus my energy on. So it was, a lot of things kind of accumulating, and I mean, the brand itself made a lot. Like, I just was like, hey, I'm going to let myself, act on some of my creativity. I would always look at marketing and be super intrigued by it and be like, I can do better than that. Like, I think better than that, but I just never had the stones to do it, and I was like, all right, I got this idea. I'm going to see it out. And, a lot of people looked at me cross-eyed, and I also met Matt. Like, it was a really good time. And he was like, hell yeah, I don't know anybody. I don't trust anyone. You look like you're somewhat trustworthy. I'll put your clothes on. But yeah, that I look back at that, and I do a lot of one-on-ones with college kids that, capstone stuff, like looking for like mentorship. And, I tell them what I was told too at that age, which is like taking, the importance of like believing in yourself, but then the extension of that is taking a chance on yourself. That bet is the only bet you'll ever make in your life. And it's not a bet, because once you do it, you've done it, right? Now what is the most comfortable thing in your life, which is like, if this all crumbles around me, guess what? I'm just going to pick myself up and I'm going to do it again, because I know how to do it. And it's not that hard, so that was Redline for me. It was like just something that I got super passionate about quick. And I learned what the passion does. For it could have been widgets is what immediately registered with me. It didn't matter. It was just my passion in that. And then, in a great community, and found some good people to work with, blew it up. But it just was it was a lightning rod for my, entrepreneurial spirit. And it's, I will be on my deathbed saying that was the moment in my life, where it was, I finally figured out, and it's trickled so many things off of that. It just, it's that confidence moment. And I know you've been through it. You've gotten out, and it's a scary moment to say, like, I'm going to be on my own and go do something like that. And, but wow, it's like, I got to think people bat 1,000 off of that. I really do. Like, maybe I'm crazy, but when you take a chance on yourself and you have to do the books and, pack the boxes and ship and, go to the events, like every weekend for like 5 years, I was in a different CrossFit gym and renting U-Hauls and, eating burgers at Fuddruckers everywhere. It just was like the grind. And you do that, like win or lose in that business itself, you've now got all the tools.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I love to hear it. Yeah, people assume that entrepreneurship is a sexy thing, man. It's a cool word. They don't understand that it's the 4:30 wake ups and showing up at the box with your supplements, in hand with some shaker cups and some shot cups, some Dixie cups you can just sample. Just get an opportunity to get in the door and hope that people will like your stuff and want to roll with it. For you, it was clothes. Now, you mentioned that Matt was your first athlete that you worked with. Was this like you saw this dude train and was like, okay, he's the one, right? Like, look, I can't believe what I'm seeing right now. Or was it more like, okay, good kid, hard worker. Ah, man, let's slap some t-shirts on him and see what happens.
It's a lot of it, right? But it was, we had a friend in common, funny enough, but Mac went to his first regional, and the backstory on it, I can't, like, he's launched his YouTube. I can't wait for him to tell more depth on these stories, because he's always just been, uniquely guarded competitively, which I love, right? But that year, he didn't even train CrossFit. It was like once a week, and he ended up like fifth at regionals or fourth or something. And but I saw him compete. So he was remember the triple overhead squat from the ground that year, and he was in the middle lane, and this kid is sitting in the bottom of the squat with 305 or 315 overhead, and looking at his judge and saying, am I low enough? And no, at the time, like 315 overhead squat, people were like, that was like everybody's 1RM, if that, you know? And I'm like, who is this kid? And kind of watched the rest of the weekend. And it was like just a player attraction, fan attraction. I was just like, this is my guy in CrossFit. I just like how he rolls, you know, he's got swagger. And then I go back to my gym, and my gym was like a big Olympic lifting gym too. And there was a girl that was like finished like 15th in worlds and in weightlifting that Matt lifted in the Olympic program with. And she was like, oh, that's my buddy. Like, we live together. And so she was like, hey, he's competing. I said sometime soon. It was the ECC, but the ECC prior to what we all knew it from, it was like in like September or something. She's like, why don't we all go watch him compete? And I did. And that's where I met him. And that's right when Redline was starting. And, you know, when you meet, when I met Matt was like this, like super guarded, shy, untrusting. Like he wouldn't trust like his first cousin at that point. Like it was like, you know, and he come from an environment like that, you know, his parents were professional athletes, got screwed by an agent. I wasn't even an agent at the time, but like they just had like a rocky ride in sports, and he didn't have any intentions in being a CrossFit athlete either, which was part of it. So it was kind of like, you want to sponsor me? Like, are you going through a midlife crisis? Like, I'm just going to chase these $2,000 checks at like local gyms on weekends. And if you can find me those, we can be buddies. And so that I just kind of like this style, and we grew from there. And what I think, you know, he tells the story in a lot of the fitness films. I went up and spent some time with him in Vermont, and I looked at him that winter, and I was like, hey, dude, like, I don't want to put any pressure on you, but you can win the CrossFit Games. And he was like, you're out of your mind. And I was like, no, like, I'm pretty, like, I've played sports, like, I know talent. I know this sport really well because I enjoy it. So I've now studied it. I'm like, you can beat Rich. And he was like, nah, man. He's like, I don't even know if I want to do it. And he almost did, you know, and I think I gained a lot of cred at that point. The trust was over time, which is, by the way, what the most beautiful piece of Matt is. Those close with him, that's not like he met some guy on a weekend and then they're like hanging out every other week. Like, it's a process with him. It means something to say the things he says about people he loves. And it's so cool. Just, he's a good a friend as I'll ever have. And we have such a beautiful business relationship. And what, you know, at the athletic stuff, like I was like, you know, I call myself the caddy. I get to run around and, you know, pat him on the back and give him a few words of encouragement here and there, and watch maybe one of the greatest feats in sports history. You know, it's up there, and it's crazy. It's such a cool ride. I'm pretty great, pretty lucky and incredibly grateful.
Oh man. Yeah, you guys' teamwork and journey throughout the years has been amazing. Matt is certainly second to none. I got a Fraser story myself, man. And I think, to be honest, I'm not 100% sure, but I'm quite sure that this was like a week after I met you, because I think I was
in
on
Utah.
that. No. So that would have been the next year when Matt came to Utah. So we had kind of interacted a few times already at that point then, because it was like at the games that year, and then, you know, maybe as well as what I'm about to share with the ECC. So those years, the ECC and Wadapalooza was really close. And this was probably after, of course, you had already seen them compete. So this is now when the ECC is like the ECC, the East Coast Championship.
By the way, so this is the first event that he was and I were kind of like rolling together. This is 2014 ECC.
Yes.
Right. So this is the beginning.
I love it. So to set the stage, I had just come off of competing on a team. I was interested in going individual this next year. I roll in with a lot of what is categorized or known as Hacks Pack. Our team is there. A lot of fit individuals. Tommy Hackenbrook leading the way. My man was second at the CrossFit Games back in the day, and has been, I mean, the year that Matt came second, Tommy finished sixth. You know, and was right there for vying for a podium spot, but blew up at the end. And, you know, he was trying to win the whole thing. But the long story short is that Tommy was still in his prime at the time, showed up at the ECC, and there was one workout that I kind of picked out, like, okay, he's gonna ball out on this workout. And it involved rope climbs, it involved overhead squats, which at the time was like, I think 205 or something in a workout, which again, like you mentioned already, O'Keefe, at this is like Okay, that was challenging, especially at the end of a workout. I have some clean and jerks and some high box jumps. Anyways, I watched Mat Fraser in the warm up area in like a big oversized flannel shirt. And seriously, he had on like some big baggy sweatpants, right? And then of course he gets warmed up and then he takes off. He's got his Redline shorts on, and some t-shirt,
Down
probably
to his
Redline
ankles.
t-shirt. Exactly. Yeah. Big stuff. It was big stuff, no lie. And everybody else is there in kind of like the Reebok stuff, the stuff that they had gotten previously from the CrossFit Games. He goes out and just hands it to the field in this workout. And I mean, to the point where it was like, guys are standing at the bar getting ready to do the overhead squats. Mat walks up to it, snatches it, bangs out the 15 overhead squats, unbroken, goes to the rope, finishes the workout, and then it was over. And I was like, at this point, my impression was immediately, he is going to be trouble for a lot of people, right? And the reason is because this was truly a well-rounded workout. And then that whole weekend, he went on to thrive. I think that might have been workout 1 or workout 2. And then, so immediately when I got home from Boston that weekend, I was looking at him on YouTube. And then the one video that popped up was him doing Isabel 225. And I was like, oh, here we go. Like, we're there now. Like, we got guys doing this. Okay, fantastic. I mean, and it was so impressive the way that he moved. And I didn't know his athletic background at the time, but I recognized, and I was like, oh man. And then of course, long story short, man, that regional, he would go on and really pave his way all the way to the games and do his thing. And it was just, you guys created quite the momentum together after that. But yeah, that was my first impression, bro.
That story, so when I told you the time I went up and told him I thought he could win the games was just prior to that. So Ben, the reason he ended up at ECC that year was Ben put a challenge up called Godzilla, and it was I can't remember the exact thing. It was one legless rope climb. It was 2 snatches at 225, and again at the time 225 snatch was a big snatch. 3 back squats at 365 and 4 12-inch parallel handstand push-ups for 3 rounds. And Matt's like, hey, you got a camera? And I was like, yeah, why? He's like, come on up, we'll hang out. We haven't had a chance to hang out, and I need you to film this workout for this guy Bergeron. Literally just like that. And I was like, what is it? And he told me it, and I was like, oh, I saw that, like Craig Kenny did in like 8 minutes. He's like, yeah. He's like, I just tested around. He's like, I think I can do it in under 3 minutes. And I was like, no, you can't. Okay. So I go up there and film it, and I call Ben, and I'm like, I can't upload this video, but I'm like, he did it in 240. And he's like, dude, no, it's 3 rounds. And I was like, yeah, he did 3 rounds. And Ben famously that night sent him a DM through Facebook and said, hey, move to Boston. I'll coach you and you'll win the CrossFit Games, But that ECC, you guys were the Killcliff crowd.
Yep.
And
yep.
But Matt was coming from the back because he didn't know anybody. And so he'd come out and he'd be like, hey, I really like this guy. He's this big guy. We're like talking crap. His name's Hucklebuck, and it was like Tommy Hackenberg. Yeah. And then he's like, this guy Spieler asked me like who I was. And he's like, who is he? And I'm like, oh, wow, buddy, you got a lot to learn, but yeah.
No, that's honestly one of the most pure things about it, right? Like, it's truly looking back on the experience. It was very obvious that he wasn't a part of the crowd or part of the culture at that point, and he was just a young, hungry kid. And I love that. And I love thinking back to it now from what I identified and not even really knowing his work ethic, and how he would mature throughout the years, but to watch it really come to fruition is a really cool thing to me. And now we're going to kind of fast forward quite a bit, but in these present times, Matt, like, you have seen this transformation in an athlete like Mat Fraser, and we're at what seems to be the end of his competitive career for now. Like, what's next, and how do you deal with this as a manager and leader in his life, or such an integral part of his team?
Yeah, I've gotten this a lot lately. It's been very emotional, but like celebratory emotional, in that it's there's very few things that I've been involved in my life that have felt as right as this. And a lot of people don't get it when I say that. The process to which Matt retired recently was a long process that is no surprise to any of us very close to him, because we know his why, we know how he's wired, I know how hard he works. And that's not to say anybody else doesn't work hard. I've been around it all. And Matt like nearly dies every day. Like, and that's the limit he chooses to take himself to get where he wants to get. Like, he just knows if he does today what others aren't willing to do, they can't do it tomorrow, right? Like, that's his thing, you know? So, and he lived that for 8 years, man. And it got to a point, I think last year, where he was like done after. So that tight race with Noah, we had an exchange in the tunnel after where he was like, I was like, you good? And he's like, I'm done. And I was like, dude, don't do that. And he was like, yeah, you're right, whatever. And he almost took his shoes off on the floor. He told me when he came in, he's like, I felt it, you know? And I'm like, I'm glad you didn't. You can think it through. And I thought he was done. And it would have been cool at that time, because I just know, like, he didn't set out to win. You know, it looks it now. He won 5, he beat the 4. You know, that became a thing at the end, because it was like, you know what, I've earned this. Like, I'm gonna put the nail in, you know. But like, that wasn't it at the beginning. It was like, you know, there was financial stuff that he was interested in because he could make a life for himself, and, you know, and then just, you know, being the best he could be every year, until the point where he said, I'm not having fun anymore, I'm done. And I think that last year was a stretch on that. I think there was a lot of moments of fun because he was in a great environment with Tia and Shane, and we bubbled a lot and just, you know, really made sure that it was a loving environment. But I knew it was over. Like, we never talked about it. It was never like, this is my last. But when leading up to that games, it was no doubt in my mind that he would take a month or 2, whatever, process it, and he would tell me he would be done. It made perfect sense. And I think a lot of it was checking some boxes, like, hey, what's next for me? Because, you know, I am pretty fit. So if I've got nothing else to do, I'll just go compete again and be unhappy maybe, but like, I know I can continue to be at the top of the sport. And we sat down, funny, he flew to Miami. We met in my office and we did like 14 hours. We ate 3 meals in a conference room and drew on this board all day. And he was like buzzing after, like, let's go, like calling some sponsors and telling him he was going to retire. Like, he was in, and it was all he needed to know, is like, what's next is probably more fun for him. He can show his intelligence, which is, he's got a high level of intellect. He wants to be an entrepreneur, and it's truly already taken off. Like, he is so busy. Like, he's far busier for a guy like me today than it was in competition, because it was so cookie cutter before. It was like, you get sponsors, you do your job, but you work really hard in the gym and everything else takes care of itself, and I'll handle all the noise, you know. And now it's like every day, like on the phone, like, what about this, what about that? And so it's awesome, it's fun, it's like got me like charged again too. And I don't know, it's funny, I thought I'd be really, it's funny, I've lived a lot of life with athletic regret, you know. You know, maybe not feeling like I got everything out of it, or not getting to the level I wanted to. Wish we won this game. And it's easier to not have regret when you walk out with somebody on top, right? And they've won and they're the greatest of all time. But like, I have no regret for him, with him, that it's over. You know, wishing it was continuing. I'll take another year in 10 seconds, but like, it's time. Like, he's earned it, and he's worked hard. He's done really well, and he's already cranking on business. Like, I asked him last week, I was like, how you doing? He's like, man, I don't think I've ever been better, you know? So yeah, it's so cool. It's very rewarding on my side, because I met a kid without a Instagram or Facebook. And, the way I became his agent was, a company sent him a contract and wanted to give him product for all, like, 5 posts a month. And I was like, you're not signing that, and it's, taken off, and he's he's done really well. He'll never work a day if he doesn't want to, but he can do whatever he wants, so it's so cool.
I love it, and it is cool, man. It's quite the amazing story, to be honest with you. One in the fact that Matt has been so unique in the way that, like you mentioned, he's competitively private, right? He's held on to so many things, the back end, the side of things, his training, his recovery protocols and practices. And so I can see where your job throughout the years has been like pretty chill, aside from making sure things are running smooth for him, because it was just like, hey, go do your thing. We got everything else taken care of. It now there's this engagement. You're probably like, hey, bro, you can't call me at this time of the night, right? Like I know you're fired up, but let's be realistic here. So that's awesome.
I'll still take the calls.
I know.
We talk at unique hours. It's funny. One of the things that I think is like, I have a lot of information in general because I work with Pat and Brent and Cole and Matt, and I work with Katrin and Tia and Brooke Wells, and all these people are at Annie, and they like Annie and Katrin are best friends, but literally like if it meant eating the other person's esophagus out of their throat, they'd do it to win, right? But it's a cool testament to all of our relationships. But Matt's the most private person, and he read me in like I was his guy and knew everything, and it was never stressful, but I knew a lot about all those guys and couldn't tell him or them about him, and but he's the most private, and I think it'll be a cool part of next that you're already seeing it. He's willing to, like today he put out an open workout. He's never let anybody see his open workouts. Like we're going to repurpose all that content, and he's going to voice over. He put out the one today with the burpees and the front squats with the dumbbells and the cleans, and he did it twice within 2 hours, and nobody knows that story because he was pissed about his score. PR'd his clean twice, but he's going to, you're going to start to get to see a little bit of what I've probably been saying all along, like he works his ass off, and how he's wired, and everybody's heard it, but nobody's gotten a chance to see it, but on the floor at the games, or at regionals.
Absolutely. And hey, man, kudos to you as a part of that team, because I think that and kudos to Matt, of course, for making that conscious decision. But I really think it was just an amazing, not that was the intention with the strategy, but I mean, in a world where everybody's so accessible, in a world where everyone can kind of see that inside of your life or behind the scenes, and to kind of take that away, it really made it like the experience of following along this journey more so like an early 2000s adventure, right? Because you did keep the curtain closed, and now you get a chance to unveil it, and it's just leading to more and more opportunity for the brand, his personal brand, and clearly what you guys are working on. So I think that's really unique and really powerful. You mentioned something too, and we got just one or two more questions, man, before I let you go. I know you're a busy man and you got to get some time with the family. You have a wide array of athletes, and this means that you essentially have to find a way to navigate the loud and the boisterous, and the quiet and the calm. How do you do that and support these athletes and kind of meet them where they're at?
Yeah, it's you have to understand. I mean, I learned something in even some of the coaching environments is, some of the coaching units will seemingly put these groups together. You're a part of it, right? It's hard. You'll identify with this. They're not a team, right? You are, like, you're on Brood or you're on CompTrain, but like when the rubber meets the road, if two girls are training together in the same sport, like they're not a team. And I got to watch that, and even see some mistakes there, right? So it was like, and be a part of some mistakes where it was like, and it was an identification for me on the business side, which was like, listen, we're not Team O'Keefe, or we're not team group. I called myself Team Group when I started. Like, that'll tell you. And it wasn't a team. It's, everybody has their own things that are important needs, and we have to meet them. It's a customer service business, and that's such a remedial way to put it. But I have clients I have to service, and what they need, if they can't get it, I have to be responsible and mature enough to tell them that, it's not going to work, or like they need to find help otherwise. Or they've told me, I'm not perfect. Like, it doesn't always work out. And And that, that there's, I'm probably not the best fit for everybody sometimes, because there is a lot of complexity that I think emotionally is hard to overcome for a lot of athletes too. And I've dealt with that. Like I've had athletes, that I've worked with on the highest level that I'm still very close friends with today, that were just like, hey, like you work with my like most fierce competitor, like I can't do it. It's like, cool, I get it. But never because I didn't, I pushed a sponsor somewhere. I've always, it's funny. I have a guy that works with me now out of Michigan, stud, like Michigan sports management program, like got all the tools. And um, I told him the most important thing at the beginning was, listen, just if you can put your head on the pillow at night, knowing that you just did everything right, it's literally the only thing that you can really gauge yourself off of, because there's going to be a lot of times where you're going to be judged improperly or unfairly, and there's nothing you can do about it. Like you just have to, the confidence you'll exude because you just do everything right is the only thing you can control what you can. And I've done that perfectly. I know that. So that part I think has allowed that complexity to be less complex, because you build a lot of trust around that through experience. And it's a hard environment. It's not unique, but you don't see the top basketball players often with the same agent. You don't see the top baseball players with the same agent, because they're just fiercely competitive with each other for sponsors and everything. And it's worked. I'm most proud of that, because, I mean, look at who we work with, like Katrin and Tia and Annie. They could be the fiercest group, with each other, and they get along and they all do well, and we handle them each as their own individual business unit. And it's complex though, man. There's no like, it's funny. I've got mentors, and it was the thing I sought most mentorship on. And a lot of people in sports marketing live a similar life. And now I'm even more complex because I have events that athletes compete in, and I work for brands. And I have a friend at IMG that has been around a long time, an big entertainment agent. And she just kind of laughed at me and was like, we're inherently conflicted. Like, that's just the way life is in the marketing world, And I'm like, all right. I mean, that's not like, that doesn't make it okay, but but it is the reality often, because it's the ecosystem that I live in, marketing. And by the way, they work really well together. When you're working with every athlete, you have a really good, feel for the market and value, and you build great relationships with brands. And those brands, then, you do marketing work with, you can, work with athletes and events, and the events, we can support athletes and brands. It's a really cool ecosystem when it works well and you do the right thing.
I love it, dude. You hit a lot of points in there. You made it obvious that it's not easy, and it is very complex, but you hit on a really important thing. And I think it's the importance of integrity and authenticity. And unfortunately in today's world, I think those things are few and far between, right? But like you mentioned, even with the girls being highly competitive, but they're adults and they are friends. And it's just like, I remember being on the guy's side, it's like, hey, we're gonna be buddy buddy, but then when it's time to line up in the corrals, and like you see everybody's eyes kind of gloss over, like, okay, now it's time to step on some throats, right? And that was just the way that it was going to be from each individual's perspective. But it's kind of the same way that you guys are running the ship. You understand your athletes, like, they work together, but when it's time to be on the competition floor, man, it's to each his own. Good luck to you.
Hey, it's funny. I learned a lot of this at Wadapalooza too, because I was immediately making my life more complex in a lot of ways, because we were, keepers of like one of the most prized earning opportunities for athletes that I fully intended on pressing on too. Like, I wanted to double that down. Athletes are most important to our organization. So it was like, how can we help them earn more, be visible to brands, but, also pay them. But now I'm seemingly in control of what is the program, which it doesn't matter. Like, it's another thing that I just know I've done perfectly, right? It's just, you can't win the battle of telling people that, my actions do, it's the actions and intentions thing. speak to that, but it's like, I just remove myself from it. Yeah. Do I know what the workouts are? But I wouldn't tell. I mean, Matt's a closer, he knows everything about me. If he was competing at my event, he know, like, he wouldn't even put me in that position, and it's, but I learned a lot through that, and through those athlete relationships, that there's one thing that works in all of that. And it doesn't matter what you do, it's just communication. And if you communicate and you're just up front, and either communicating, like, this is a line we're not crossing, or like publicly, no matter what it is, like, communication takes care of everything. And anything I've ever suffered from in life or business is because of lack of communication. So, and I think it's something we'll all as humans learn a continuous lesson on, because communication can be so complex and hard at times. But it takes care of it. It's just, um, again, it's just, in the end, you if you're, hear what Matt says. If you make yourself proud, you make everything else takes care of itself, is essentially the message, but you make everybody around you that's important proud. And that's really it. Like, you just do that, and you can't take care of everything, like the noise or like any speculation. It's just, I mean, you've seen it all. It's just, if I could put my head on the pillow at night, it's worked for the last 10 years.
Dude, that's refreshing. You know what I mean? You make yourself proud. That should be everybody's goal, right? Make yourself proud. Everything else will take care of itself. I got one final question for you, man, because I'm a big advocate of dreaming and forethought and foresight. Because I think that, if you manifest it in your mind, you can become it. What are you doing in 5 years, bro?
Wow. This is like the interview question. I think I might even ask this every once in a while. Yeah, for me, a lot of my goals would live in the sport, and what this looks like. It's for other people. I think it's, we've got so much work to do. We've weathered an incredible storm the last couple of years in the sport. And man, the resiliency of the community and the athletes and the brands involved, COVID, like, man, you could not. CrossFit has, as an industry, weathered more of a storm than anyone, because you've got all the issues on top of COVID. It's just, really, I want this sport to be where it deserves and belongs to be, purses to be up, more eyeballs on it globally, more people competing from other regions at significant levels, because the youth are seeing the benefit in it, and doing it from a younger age and training for it. I want to, pioneer the sport. And I want that to look a lot differently tomorrow, next year, 5 years from now. I want it to be, a top 10 sport in the world, that people, you can't go anywhere and not know Matt or Tia or Katrin, or who, when the games is. And I don't think that's a crazy goal. In all the heat of everything that went on, I pointed a lot, in trying to lead to hockey and basketball and golf. I love golf, and what that looked like 50 and 60 years ago. And people dreamt, and they were crazy, and they were probably thought to be, communists or witchcraft, at the time, thinking that this thing could be these wildly crazy, successful we can, and here, the finish of that is what I've become most passionate about in our spaces position. Is training is the most cohesive sports story in the world. There's 2 billion people that train on a daily basis, and there's only 7.5 billion people in the world. You can tell the most, recognizable, relatable sports story through training to anybody. So LeBron James, you're better off as a brand telling him his story working out than him dunking a basketball, because, my kid and my wife can relate to that because they work out, and that is like becoming a huge marketing play, and that's becoming very recognized, and everybody's trying to tell that story. So I think the sky's the limit in the sport. I believe we'll ride that and just look very, very cool in 5 years. And I want to be a big part of that.
I know. I don't think I know that you will for sure. And I think that we also have a wonderful, new leader in the space, in Eric Rosa, that's going to continue to take us to new heights and new levels. I think the
We
timing
do.
with COVID and everything else, man, I really believe that the sport's about to go somewhere special for sure. And I think we'll even see it within the next 18 months, 2 years, man. It's gonna be pretty powerful.
It is. It's been a really good, yeah, I mean, still like uniquely frustrating, but like in a good way, just like people are all starting to point in the same north, that part is starting to happen, and we're debating about the right things now,
Yep.
and it's, so that's where you start to get, comfortable with what it looks like, next year and 5 years and 10 years down the line. And you're right. Eric is not going to lose. And he's got people around him that he's empowering to do that with him, and that are taking on that mentality. And I'm really optimistic. It's been a very cool 180. It's a incredible story, a global cool sports story, where we were and where we are already. And I think, a lot to still come. The next couple of years are going to be very, very, very cool and interesting.
Absolutely. I agree, man. Big things coming, and I appreciate you being on the show, dude. I think that'll do it for my questions. Is there anything else that you want to add or leave the listeners with? Where's a good place for these guys to kind of follow along and keep up with your journey?
Well, thank you, first of all, for having me. It's always great to catch up with you. We've known each other a long time. I'm a huge fan. I'm just wondering when you're saddling back up and going team again. I think like the rest of us. So you don't have to tell us now. You can announce that later. but yeah, you can. I mean, you know what? You can find me on Loud and Live Sports handle is a good source of what we're doing as a team. And the individual events, we have a couple events, part of the semifinals, West Coast Classic and Granite Games, and Wadapalooza will be back in January. Those are great places to see what we have going on and what our team's doing, what the athletes are doing. Our Loud and Live Instagram handle, Loud and Live Sports, at Loud and Live Sports, is a good place for that. There's so many cool partnerships happening, new brands entering the space. So that's a great place to check us out.
Awesome. Well, guys, go do that, follow along. And I hope that you got some tremendous value from this interview with the Mat O'Keefe, or Chief Keefe as they call you, because I certainly did, man. I appreciate all your tidbits, all your advice, and I appreciate you being willing to share your journey to keep rising. So thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Adrian. Always a pleasure.